Welcome to Executives at the Edge, the podcast from Amplify. Each episode features insights from the top network, cloud, and technology executives, giving you key takeaways to help you grow your revenue and bring solutions to market faster. I'm your host, Pascal Menezes. Join me as we explore thought-provoking perspectives from the leaders and changemakers propelling the AI-powered digital economy forward. Well, I'm really super excited to have Ari Weil. He's the VP of Product Marketing at Akamai. Now, this episode is going to be really amazing because, as you know, Akamai came from the CDN world and, all about the edges. And now we're going to talk a lot about how Akamai's evolved their product portfolio to handle AI at the edge, including the emergence of agentic AI. And I think you're going to find this episode very fascinating. So with that, I'd like to welcome Ari to Executives at the Edge. And for our listeners, can you give us a little bit more about your background and what Akamai does and will be doing in the future?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us on the podcast. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Ari Weil. I work on product marketing and cloud evangelism for the company. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Akamai, we're a company that pioneered the content delivery network back in the late 90s. We've been a long time in building out a global architecture that will support high throughput use cases like media delivery, web applications, and a growing number of customer facing use cases to support the enterprise. As a platform, we've really evolved that architecture to start adding additional capabilities like edge computing, application and network security solutions. And then more recently, we've expanded into full stack cloud computing as well, so that we can take advantage of that global network that Akamai's built out and really start applying it to those use cases that require low latency, high throughput compute for things like, AI agents, or as people think about evolving the interactive experiences with their media delivery and their streaming media or gaming use cases. And then as we expand and as we grow, we're looking to additional ways that CIOs and CTOs are thinking about evolving their architectures to take advantage of what might be next for their businesses.
Well, thank you, Ari. So I think many listeners want to understand it's been a long journey for you guys. You started probably decades ago, coming from the CDN business. The world has changed. Of course, it's still relevant, CDNs, but I think you've added zero trust products in, you've got bot products, and now you're adding all kinds of AI product portfolios because, of course, you come from the edge and you're all about the edge. And so naturally, inference and low latency inference becomes important. So any thoughts about how all of this comes together, how AI and the new workflow of AI impacts and really gives you a new opportunity for your business?
Absolutely. It's really interesting to see how customers have been leading Akamai through the sets of challenges that they have as they're bringing digital experiences to life. So as you said, we started in the content delivery space because at the time there was the worldwide weight that we had to overcome with instability and latency in the internet. Now the internet has improved, but people don't really realize just how fragile it can be, with massive outages taking out household names. Just recently we saw an experience where there was a massive outage and people really struggle to understand, is it my internet service provider? Is it my CDN or networking partner? Is it the person or the company, that I'm putting in front of my experiences to secure them? But as complex as architectures have become, it's become even more complicated for businesses to really think about how they can build, secure, and scale all of their applications and their customer-facing experiences, because there is no one platform that customers can use to go from core to edge to really engage their customers in a compliant, highly available, and really with an experience that the customers will enjoy so that they can build trust with those customers and ultimately realize lifetime value. Now, thinking about how the world is evolving, AI hit the stage with, ChatGPT and OpenAI really lighting the internet on fire and the world on fire, thinking about all of the possibility with more autonomous experiences that we didn't have to conceive of when we were building the products in the beginning. So if you think about, if I'm a retailer and for years I've been trying to think about how can I show you the right product, give you a tailored experience for what you might be looking for, and always anticipate and deliver to you not only the products that you're trying to glean for me. If I'm a retailer, I might be trying to buy something. If I'm engaging with a consumer bank, I might be thinking about investments that I might like to make and understanding the products that you have. If I'm in video delivery or video on demand, I might be really interested in your catalog of things that I can watch or games that I might be able to play. But I don't necessarily know the context of how you're engaging with me as a brand. And so AI is now promising to bring a lot of that knowledge that businesses have of their customer, and then the context that the customer is creating as they're engaging with those businesses' applications, and then making autonomous decisions in real time to provide that user with exactly what they are looking for. 10 years ago, personalization felt magical. Now personalization feels like it's based on cohorts. You and I aren't the same, but demographically, we might look very similar as far as our age and the fact that we're in the United States and we both work in high tech. But if you really think about it, you and I are very different. Our attitudes, the way that we might want to engage with our favorite brands will be completely different. And what CTOs and CIOs are approaching Akamai for is really a way that they can start to drive their teams to architect secure experiences by default. But not only are they needing to be secure, they're also needing to be highly dynamic. And so there needs to be a certain amount of autonomy in the technology that we're deploying to engage with users who are acting very autonomously by virtue of being humans. And what is the architecture that will allow us to basically deliver that experience, provide that autonomy, but maintain some governance and compliance around the experiences that we're enabling? Because as we know, if you look at anything from compliance regimes or the way that users expect us to keep their data private, or that businesses need to compete by protecting their IP, it's never been more important to expose some of these things out to our customers, but it's also never been more critical for us to make sure that we're doing it in a secure way that's keeping our customers' data private and maintaining our competitive advantage while still being able to drive a return on investment and growth for our business. And so it really is changing the way that people are looking at employing technology, which is why Akamai now has a delivery platform that we're using for global distribution and caching and application optimization, a full stack of application security and network security products that will provide you anything from, protection for your application in real time, the ability to detect and manage bot traffic, both good bots that might help to promote my brand and grow awareness with me, as well as nefarious bots that might be looking to compromise my defenses or implement or insert, malware via phishing schemes. So we need to provide a lot of protection for the human element and for the different types of users that might be trying to access our data. But then the compute that we need to provide in order to enable the experience ultimately that we want to expose doesn't just require caching or edge computing, which Akamai has been doing for years. It requires full stack computing at the edge. And that's really what we've been trying to highlight to the market, is that as you think about the architecture that will carry your business forward, the edge used to represent ways to make things go faster using simple means like caching or edge computing. Increasingly, it is full stack compute, working on fine-tuned models, focusing on the context from the user, the context from the data, and the context that I have for my own product catalog, and really knitting all of that together in real time. You can't do that all serverless, and you can't do that all in memory. You have to maintain state. You need more power, you need more capacity, and you really need more storage that you can manage in real time. And so we're bringing all of that compute across Akamai's high performance network to be able to execute in low latency at the edge for our customers in a way that complements the architectures that they already have, so we can accelerate their time to market and really help them with that return on investment that they're seeking, while also simplifying the architectures. So back to where I started to answer your question, it's easier for the people operating the app to really understand where the tuning needs to happen, where the scale points might occur, and ultimately how to provide that accelerated and high value correct experience to users, which is really one of the biggest concerns that businesses have with AI today. How do I know that after I enable all of these things, I won't be enabling AI basically to give my customer a hallucination instead of the right answer, the right product, the right experience that they're looking for?
So let me just recap. So I think with AI and agentic AI coming in really rapidly, models being at the edge all over the place for all kinds of models, what are your thoughts on how does Akamai play in that role? Will you be enabling GPUs that enterprises can load in at your edges because of that low latency capabilities, your network, your footprint? Will you offer, I know you have an AI and you have all the security around AI, protecting AI agents to models, and you have, I think you have an AI firewall and you have API gateways and so on. How do you see this world of AI and your edge come together?
That's a great question. So let's start with, if I'm an enterprise, the first thing that I'm going to think about is what sort of AI am I going to be investing in and implementing? There's a lot of talk around foundation models, things like ChatGPT or Llama or Claude. People are very familiar with those. They're general purpose models. They can answer pretty much any question that you throw at them. But there are some limitations and some concerns. Enterprises have been looking at those to say, what are the different things that we can train an AI model with that will be complementary to our business? Now, there's a lot that you would do there from a general purpose perspective on the hyperscalers, because I have a very large amount of data. I have a very large footprint that I need to establish as far as scaling up compute resources with things like GPUs running in containers, so that I have a way that I can build secure, scalable experiences that have the compute power to actually, provide responses on the sorts of prompts that I'm seeing. The challenge with all of that becomes my users aren't all clustered around where the hyperscalers have their data centers. And so that starts to create a challenge for me as a business, because if I want to enable interaction with a customer who isn't near one of the major metros where my hyperscalers have a data center, the latency is going to be untenable, and so will the experience. I also have the opportunity to potentially drive my customer away, because it's very difficult to have them wait for me to evaluate a prompt, going into a general purpose model, refining the output, verifying the output, and then sending it back to them. That can take multiple seconds. And so the first thing that we're focused on is, as you build your application that you want to use AI, we are providing the VMs, the containers, the managed container services, the GPUs, essentially the infrastructure that you need to build your application to take advantage of AI. The next thing is, how do I make it stop hallucinating? One of the things that you focus on when you're trying to have a specific model that's built for purpose is, what sort of AI use case am I going to pursue? There's two things that we're seeing trending very heavily right now. One is AI inference. The focus there is being able to make predictions and decisions based on a pre-trained model. So I will take the data that I have for my product, for my industry, and I'll create a small model out of a large language model that I can run in more data centers closer to my users by virtue of it being smaller and being tuned to my business. From there, we have to say, now, what is the experience with a user with that smaller model? Well, it needs to be instantaneous. I can make it faster because there's less questions that I will ask it. I can be more confident in the responses, so I won't have as many hops on the way to and from that small language model as users are prompting me. I can apply security to inspect the prompts and the responses then to make sure that I'm not providing anything that violates my governance principles, or maybe would run afoul of a regulation on privacy, for example, or maybe it's transactional data or other data that is protected by a statute. And then finally, when I think about how that needs to scale with users, if all of a sudden, let's say that I have an application that generates a large amount of user demand in a specific city, I need to be able to scale up access to that model and the compute that's running against that fine-tuned model very, very quickly, and in a way that doesn't impose round-trip latency for that user. And that's where we're extending those containers and those GPUs out to our edge. So we actually have a managed container platform that is running applications in a containerized environment for our customers that takes full advantage of the edge. And so what you end up with is, with my large language models and my centralized compute on the hyperscalers, Akamai is now providing you with a way to build the AI application as a complementary additive thing beyond what you're doing centrally, and then to apply the security and the scaling and the high availability disaster recovery on our global platform by taking cues from what we built with the CDN over decades, which is the ability to scale on demand, but also to deal with things like internet outages, delays in internet service providers in reaching a customer, and also when we need to do failover within our own network to ensure that great experience without the user having to architect everything themselves like they would do in a hyperscaler. So we're taking the best parts of a CDN with that sort of set and forget approach where the CDN manages your availability, your scale, and your distribution. And we're marrying that with cloud computing, but we're doing it from the core out to the edge in a way that takes advantage of our unique advantages of capacity at the edge, the relationships that we have with networking partners, and the ability to provide that compute and security in the same place closer to that user.
You know, that's a very fascinating, because you are really in a really good position, because you probably, I'm not sure how many POPs you have and how many edges locations you have, but I imagine it's massive, just from your CDN history. So are you saying that these enterprises, as they finally tune their models, get smarter models, they want to deploy them to the edge to get a very great response time and a great experience, you're enabling the infrastructure for all of that, if I heard that correctly, plus all the security that wraps around it. So my question to you is, these models that these enterprises want to use, does that mean that you have a way, because I know in the CDN world, you would put your main content, what you wanted to distribute, and then it would just replicate all across your CDN network. Do they do the same idea? They have a model, they put it into kind of like, I can't remember the terminology back then, somewhere, and then your CDN network replicates those models in strategic locations what the customer wants. Like, how does that work?
So we're actually enabling the customer to have the choice of exactly how they want to do what you're describing. The first thing is, if you would like to do it manually, then we have the ability with our different core data centers, distributed data centers that we've been building out. We talked about something called Project Gecko, where we really wanted to expand core centralized compute resources and data centers out closer to the edge. And so we've basically built a 3-step model. The core, which is similar to the hyperscalers in the sense of we will deploy in major metros, we will have larger data centers with more power, more cooling, more capacity. And then we will add distributed that gets you closer to more of the users that you have globally, where we'd have slightly less capacity available in those distributed centers. And then finally, the edge, where it is the most ephemeral place with the smallest data center, smallest footprint, but the largest number of points of presence, and then basically allow you to scale your compute the way that you see fit. So you can deploy VMs or containers, you can scale them yourself, or you can use our managed services, like our managed container service, which we call LKE, on the platform to help facilitate that scaling. The third option is to use a fully managed container platform. And in that case, what you do is you architect your application, you provide it to Akamai either in a containerized or in a virtual environment, sort of a form. And then we will, with your business logic, make the determination on where we should deploy it, how we should scale it, what sort of KPIs we look at to understand scale points, whether that is IOs per second, if it's a data intensive, storage intensive use case, if it's compute cycles and the amount of utilization we're seeing out of CPUs, but we can build that for the customer. And in that way, the customer operates their app, Akamai manages all the distribution and the scale for it, and you still get the advantage of taking all of Akamai's POPs into your footprint for the delivery of the application, but without any of the overhead and the maintenance. So depending on the sophistication of the team that's running the app, but also your experience with your customers, you can either have ultimate control over everything, or you can outsource it fully to Akamai as a managed service using our edge, or somewhere in between, just pick the managed services that will facilitate where you need either augmentation or automation in your approach.
I've always had this question for our membership, which are mainly service providers. They have RANs and POPs, but they have limited real estate on how much compute they can put in. You guys started with putting your racks into ISPs and POPs and so on, service provider POPs. But obviously that won't scale to the amount of models you have to support by a customer. Let's say you have a certain location, you have to load in 10,000 models for 10,000 different customers. How have you gotten around that? Have you built now new infrastructure and data centers from the data center guys, bought the cages, power, built in all, because this is a whole, it takes a lot of power. It takes it's huge space, so on.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a reason that we've been seeing in the news cycle, people, talking about 3 Mile Island to power, new data center builds out for some of the clouds out there. I mean, capacity and compute power are a real challenge, and many companies are really worried about where will all of that capacity be. I think with most enterprises focusing on using existing foundation models, a lot of the concern that they have for the volume, just the pure volume of storage and GPU compute resources isn't going to be something that every enterprise needs to address. And that's what we're seeing with our customers. What they're saying is we have one strategy for how we will leverage AI as a business, but as companies are looking to monetize, as they're thinking about time to market, this is really more about the fine-tuned models. And those fine-tuned models, I mean, they're big, but in Akamai's sort of, experience, it doesn't represent content or volumes that we haven't seen. If I think about the size of, a fine-tuned model or an industry-specific model that a customer might want to host on Akamai, we're talking about, petabytes of data potentially at the very larger end, but a lot of these models will be smaller. And so we've been building out core and distributed data center capacity in order to house some of that data and some of those models for our customers. But what we've been interested in seeing with the customers is essentially how much they're really focusing on, right now, some easy things. Chatbots don't require a huge volume of data. There's not a lot of complexity there. As we move into inference, the models are bigger. There is more of a dynamic engagement with them, but it's still, each of those inference applications have been fine-tuned to provide a specific function. And so they are only so large, and we can manage those between the capacity that we already have in the data centers that we built to support the edge, but adding those cloud data centers is helping us to build that capacity. It's also driving the roadmap that we have for our object storage platform, our block storage platform, how we think about the managed database services, the type of databases and distributed databases that we need to manage. But ultimately, the thing that we're really thinking forward about, what we want to architect for, is that agentic AI use case that isn't so commonplace today. And that's where your question, I think, is really going to become interesting from a capacity and a scarcity perspective, because the goal of agentic AI is different than AI inference. In that case, you're really looking to continuously learn with human intervention. You want to enable some autonomy so that agents can set their own goals, so that they can make decisions based on the environment, based on that context that they're able to gain access to. I haven't seen many enterprises who are there yet, like at scale for agentic AI use cases, but that is where we're starting to work with our customers to really understand how many models do you need to drive an agentic use case, and how large are they? How frequently do they change? How dynamic are the responses really? I haven't seen many enterprises that are fully, opening the aperture on autonomy yet, because there are still those concerns about hallucinations, about getting things wrong, about how we protect our data and protect our users. And so what we've been seeing more of is a heavy focus on chatbot type agents. AI inference is starting to pick up momentum. The focus right now is, how do I take my existing security infrastructure for things like web application firewalls or web app and API protection, AI gateways, API gateways, and then add things like AI firewalls that actually do prompt inspection, and layer those things in for those early use cases of the chatbot and then the inference. And that will then drive some of what the customers are thinking about for the future of their architectures. And when we think about that, the AI strategy really does take advantage of the emerging sort of enterprise architecture that we've seen over the course of the last 5 to 7 years. You need to have a hyperscaler partner and other clouds that might be able to support your specific use case. You need to have a CDN so that you can both distribute and cache responses. CDNs are working on AI gateway capabilities that will do semantic caching, so that the same offload you used to get for content, you can now get for prompts and responses to a fine-tuned model that you would be hosting yourself as a business. And then you think about some of the other capabilities you need. You mentioned it. You need SSE to control access to the data and to validate that the people who are accessing the data are the right people. You need the AI firewall capability, and increasingly you will need more specialized AI security infrastructure that builds off of the web app and API protection that you have. And then sort of the last piece that we've been seeing is really strong real-time observability and the ability to take any of your delivery data, your compute data, your security data, and in real time query that to understand what exactly is happening with our data, with our users, and the experience that together they are creating, so that you can learn how to do real-time response in a way that up until now, hasn't been as complicated because most of the questions and answers have been pretty fixed. But as we move towards that agentic AI future and we start thinking about, to your point again, how many models, how much storage capacity do we need, how much compute do we need? The other question is, where exactly are some of those decisions and the security for those decisions going to be applied? And what we're seeing is right now they're taking advantage of the capacity and the proximity of the edge, because that's where the data is, that's where the context is, and ultimately that's where all of the decisions need to be made.
Well, Ari, I think we're come to the end of our time limit, and I think this has been a fascinating topic, and I think we could go on for hours. But I want to thank you for being on this episode, and I think our listeners are going to find this very fascinating.
It's great. Thank you so much, Pascal. I'm looking forward to continuing it in the future.
Thank you for listening to Executives at the Edge, brought to you by Amplify. Be sure to follow, share, and leave a review. Catch every episode on your favorite platform or visit us at amplify.net.